This video is sponsored by Surfshark. The release of Amazon's Lord of the Rings of Power is fast approaching, and so the marketing campaign is kicking into high gear. Alas, that marketing campaign is taking all the wrong lessons from Kathleen Kennedy's Star Wars. There's more going on in the world of Tolkien though, as there is a new corporate party to contend with, namely the Embracer Group. How will this change matters going forward? We shall see, because in this video we will begin by comparing and contrasting the latest marketing materials for Star Wars Andor and the Rings of Power respectively, before exploring what is up with the Embracer Group and how they might influence things moving forward for Tolkien's world. To set the stage for the Rings of Power, let's begin by looking into Star Wars Andor, the prequel series to Star Wars Rogue One, which will soon be coming to Disney+. Quite a few liked Rogue One, despite the production being such a mess that Tony Gilroy had to be brought in for reshoots. Now, Tony Gilroy is back for Andor, and way back in May, he bragged to Vanity Fair, the go-to publication for paid-for puff pieces centered on modern political undertones, that Andor would fundamentally change Star Wars. Gilroy was relatively vague on how he was going to do that, but that was clarified on August 2nd, when Empire highlighted the considerable contemporary resonance, and quoted actress Fiona Shaw saying, "Tony has written a great scurrilous take on the Trumpian world," conveniently ignoring the fact that this Trumpian world began 6 years ago and ended 2 years ago. Her scripted and approved statement proceeded to gaslight the audience, saying, "Our world is exploding in different places right now. People's rights are disappearing, and Andor reflects that." In the show, the Empire is taking over, and it feels like the same thing is happening in our reality too right now. Doubling down on this contemporary resonance, on August 18th, Total Film magazine promised the series would also tackle contemporary gender issues. So yeah, way to promote a franchise where the cornerstone has always been its universal appeal and mythological storytelling right there. I'd imagine that just like Pixar's Lightyear, Star Wars Andor won't sell Disney Plus subscriptions so much as it will drive more people to the high seas. You shouldn't do that though. Not only is piracy wrong, you would be exposing yourself to endless spyware, tracking software and other malware out there on the high seas. And that's on top of all the data that is stolen from you during all of your regular browsing and sold to third parties. Have you noticed all the spam and scam emails you're getting? Well, they're among those third parties. That's how that happens. There's a fix for that though. To protect yourself, you need to protect your data, and a good way of doing that is through a VPN, such as the one delivered by this channel's sponsor, Surfshark. A VPN, or Virtual Private Network, is a privacy protection tool which guarantees instant online safety and encrypts all data sent via the internet, thereby protecting your data and you. But there's more. Surfshark allows you to bypass geo-blocking restrictions by changing the country you access the internet from, which gives some great advantages when it comes to streaming. For instance, you can access 15 different Netflix libraries, all with a different selection of movies and TV series, simply by changing your virtual location. Not only that, outside of the US, Star, the international version of Hulu, comes bundled with Disney+. If you're in the US and change your location to say the UK, well then you just might get Star as well. That's pretty good, but it gets even better. If you type in the code MIDNIGHT when ordering, that triggers an exclusive offer in which you now get 83% off the normal list price, plus 3 extra months for free. Furthermore, Surfshark also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in trying it out. Do check out the link in the description below for further details and to order. Thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video, and with that, let's get into the Rings of Power, learning all the wrong lessons from Star Wars. Like Star Wars, Tolkien's Middle-earth stories are timeless tales, featuring mythological storytelling devices. Peter Jackson understood this, which is why his movies were worldwide event smash hits. You'd think that the makers of Amazon's The Rings of Power at the very least would consult with him, and on August 5th, we learn from The Hollywood Reporter that they initially did. but then ghosted him when they decided to move in a different direction. Of course, we know which direction they went. Current year politics, and Hollywood politics at that. Back in February, executive producer and Bad Robot alum Lindsay Weber told Vanity Fair that it felt only natural to us that an adaptation of Tolkien's work would reflect what the world actually looks like, by which he meant what Los Angeles looks like. This obviously did not sit well with Tolkien's sizable worldwide fanbase, so in an August 15th piece in Time magazine, Weber and showrunners Payne and McKay, also Bad Robot alumni, took the opportunity to address the fanbase. Right out of the Star Wars playbook, Payne did so by dismissing the fans as trolls, and he did so by way of Tolkien's quote on trolls, creatures of dull and lumpish nature that had no more language than beasts. While Weber said, "We're all up for criticism, but we're not up for Rossicism," while tacitly dismissing any and all criticism, no matter how justified and well articulated, as just that. Since then, star Morfydd Clark also urged critical fans, in not so many words, to kindly get bent, while the remaining marketing has exclusively focused on the series' diversity, for better or worse. In other words, right out of the Star Wars playbook, even though that playbook didn't really work out so well for Star Wars. In a sense though, Star Wars problems begun when Lucasfilm was acquired by and mismanaged under Disney. The problems for the Tolkien legacy begun in earnest when Christopher Tolkien passed, and Tom Shippey was forcibly retired by Amazon. But now, there's a new owner in Middle-earth. The rights to Tolkien aren't exclusively owned by the Tolkien estate. The estate owns the ultimate rights to all of Tolkien's original writings, but due to a really bad deal from way back when, the Saul Zaentz Company owned all of the entertainment rights based on Tolkien's work. Meaning, if you want to publish some special edition of Tolkien's books somewhere in the world, that has to be licensed from the Tolkien estate. But if you want to make a movie, a board game, a video game, or a theme park adventure, that had to be licensed from the Saul Zaentz Company. Well, back in February, as we covered at the time, the Saul Zaentz Company decided it was time to cash in and announced they were looking to sell off their share of the Tolkien rights for an estimated $2 billion. But at the time when they put this price point out there, they were under the mistaken impression that they fully controlled the Tolkien movie rights. They thought so because they don't know how to read their own contracts, which is a big part of the reason why they've been involved in one lawsuit after the other over the years. Case in point, after the Saul Zaentz Company announced their intention to sell, Warner were quick to point out that they still retained the movie license to The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, as next year's animated War of the Rohirrim extends those movie rights for the better part of another decade. Since those movie rights are where the real value is, that meant the Saul Zaentz Company could kiss any hope they had of cashing in $2 billion goodbye. They still wanted to sell though, so after 6 months on the market, on August 18th, the Embracer Group announced that they had acquired Middle-earth Enterprises from the Saul Zaentz Company for an undisclosed amount. But we know it's but a fraction of the $2 billion they initially wanted, that's why the amount remains undisclosed. That aside, this means the Embracer Group now owns all the entertainment rights to all of Tolkien's worlds, stories, and characters. Let's see who the Embracer Group is. The Embracer Group has a long and very interesting history, but the extreme Cliff Notes version is that they started out as Nordic Games. And around 2011, they began acquiring other game developers and their assets, most notably the publisher THQ. In the aftermath of this, Nordic Games rebranded themselves as THQ Nordic. Several years and many successful acquisitions later, the parent holding company rebranded itself as the Embracer Group and continued growing by acquiring ever more companies. And the so far biggest catch in their ever-expanding portfolio, which already includes Tomb Raider, Deus Ex and Legacy of Kain to name but a few, is now the entertainment rights to Tolkien's Middle-earth. Question is, now that they have those rights, what will they do with them? The thing to keep in mind here is that the Embracer Group merely takes over the rights and obligations that the Soul Sands Company already had. So nothing changes for anything that was already licensed to third parties. Amazon's The Rings of Power, Warner's animated The War of the Rohirrim, and the mobile games EA are working on will proceed exactly like before, with the exception that they now have to send their license payment checks to the Embracer Group instead of the Soul Sands Company. Where Embracer can influence things are in new projects beyond those, and the first place this likely will be noticed is in an upswing in video games and possibly board games made by companies under the Embracer umbrella. Beyond games, the press release explicitly stated, other opportunities include exploring additional movies based on iconic characters such as Gandalf, Aragorn, Gollum, Galadriel, Eowyn, and other characters from the literary works of Tolkien, and continue to provide new opportunities for fans to explore this fictive world through merchandising and other experiences. However, to which extent they actually have the ability to proceed with this depends entirely on the language in the prior contracts between Warner and the Soul Sands Company, which, as you may recall, are such that not even the Soul Sands Company were sure if the rights had even reverted or not. Chances are these movies can happen, but not without Warner signing off on actually making them, and quite possibly the Tolkien estate have to have a say in that as well. That is the complicating factor here. The Tolkien rights are split between the Tolkien estate and now the Embracer Group. HarperCollins is a factor on the publishing side, while on the entertainment side of things, Warner and Amazon are both making legally separate, competing versions of Lord of the Rings. While EA are doing their thing on the game side, Wizards of the Coast are screwing up in their end, and no one can be offloaded until their contract is up. What you have here then is an ungodly entangled rights mess of the most nightmarish order, which explains why none of the major studios wanted anything to do with this, and why it took 6 months to sell off rights that under other circumstances would have gone to the highest bidder inside of a week. But this is just the kind of thing we specialize in. Look for our upcoming in-depth video on the Embracer Group and what they might mean for the Tolkien legacy and Lord of the Rings going forward. For now though, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments. And before you go, remember that to help protect your data and bypass quarrelsome geo-blocking restrictions, you should get Surfshark VPN. Use our code MIDNIGHT to get 83% off, plus 3 extra months for free. Link is in the description.